Tonight, we will journey together through ancient stories and timeless wisdom. We will explore the nature of the thinking mind, the roots of fear, and the freedom that awaits when we learn to rest in awareness itself. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you're listening from. The Buddha once said, "I teach one thing and one thing only, suffering and the end of suffering." This may sound simple, but within this simplicity lives a profound invitation. An invitation to step out of the small world we often inhabit and into the vast, boundless ocean of our true nature. So let your shoulders soften. Let your breath find its own natural rhythm. And when you are ready, let us begin this gentle journey together. There is a question that lives at the heart of all spiritual seeking. It is a question so simple that we often overlook it entirely. And yet, when we finally turn to face it, everything begins to change. The question is this: where is home? We use the word so casually. We speak of going home, of feeling at home, of making a place our home. But have we ever paused to truly ask ourselves what we mean? Have we ever wondered if the place we have grown so comfortable in, the familiar waters of our daily thoughts and habits, might actually be something far smaller than what we were made for? The ancient teachers spoke often of this. They understood that human beings have a peculiar tendency to settle. We find a small pond and call it an ocean. We grow accustomed to its boundaries, its predictable currents, its familiar shores. And after a while, we forget that anything else exists. We forget that we ever longed for something more. The Buddha himself pointed to this when he observed that most of our suffering comes not from the circumstances of our lives, but from the way we hold tightly to the small and familiar. We wrap ourselves in thoughts like soft blankets, seeking comfort in their repetition. We build walls of worry and planning, believing they will keep us safe. And all the while, the vast ocean of peace waits just beyond the edge of what we know, patient as the moon, faithful as the tide. There is a teaching that has been passed down through countless generations of seekers. It says that what we seek is not far away. It is not hidden at the top of a distant mountain or locked behind temple doors. What we seek is closer than our own breath. It is the awareness in which all experience arises. It is the stillness beneath the noise. It is home. But we have wandered. We have become so fascinated by the play of waves on the surface that we have forgotten the depths from which they rise. We have become so identified with our thoughts, our worries, our endless planning, that we have lost touch with the vast silence that holds them all. Tonight, we begin our journey with an ancient story. It comes to us from the Sufi tradition, passed down through generations of teachers who understood that the deepest truths often arrive wrapped in the clothing of a simple tale. This is the story of three fish and the day everything changed. Let us travel together to a lake in a faraway land many centuries ago. This lake had existed for longer than anyone could remember. It lay nestled in a valley between gentle hills, its waters fed by streams that wandered down from distant peaks where snow lingered even in summer. The water was clear and cool, with a soft green tint in the shallows where sunlight reached the sandy bottom, and a deep blue stillness in the center where the lake rested in quiet mystery. Along the edges, reeds grew thick and tall, their feathery tops swaying in the breeze, like dancers keeping time to music only they could hear. Willows bent low from the banks, trailing their slender leaves across the surface, creating curtains of green shadow where small fish liked to rest. Water lilies floated in quiet coves, their white and pink blossoms opening each morning to greet the sun like prayers offered without words. In the early hours, before dawn fully broke, mist would rise from the water like breath. It would drift across the surface in soft, curling ribbons, turning the lake into something from a dream. Birds would call from the reeds in gentle voices. Frogs would sing their ancient songs. And the whole world seemed hushed and holy, as if waiting for something sacred to begin. 3 fish made their home in this lake. They had been born there, as had their parents and grandparents and all their ancestors before them, stretching back through generations beyond counting. The lake was all they knew. Its depths were familiar, its currents predictable, its seasons as regular as heartbeats. They knew where the warmest waters gathered in the shallows on summer afternoons. They knew where the sweetest food could be found when autumn winds scattered seeds across the surface. They knew where to shelter when winter brought its quiet cold, and where to rise to greet the first warm days of spring. To these fish, the lake was everything. It was safety and sustenance. It was comfort and community. It was the whole of their world, the only world they could imagine. It was home. Now, among these 3 fish, there were differences in temperament and understanding. The first fish possessed a certain quality of awareness, a depth of seeing that allowed her to sense what others missed. She would often swim to the quiet places of the lake and rest there, still and watchful, as if listening to something beyond the ordinary sounds of water and wind. The other fish sometimes thought her different, too serious, too inclined towards solitude. But she had touched something in those quiet moments, some knowing that lived beneath the surface of things. The second fish was thoughtful and observant, able to understand a situation once it had unfolded. But he was also hesitant, always gathering more information before making a decision. He could see the right path clearly, but often only after the moment for taking it had nearly passed. And the third fish was active and energetic, always in motion, always looking for the next thing. He believed deeply in his own abilities, in his quickness and determination. He had never met a situation he did not think he could handle through effort alone. These 3 had known each other all their lives. They had grown up together, swam together, rested together in the quiet evenings when the water turned gold with sunset light. And though they were different, they shared one thing in common. They all believed, without ever questioning it, that the lake was the whole of reality, that nothing existed beyond its shores worth seeking. One morning, as golden light began to spread across the water and the mist started to thin, shadows appeared at the edge of the lake. The first fish, swimming near the surface in one of her contemplative moods, noticed them before the others. There was something about the way the light fell differently, something about a subtle change in the feel of the water. She rose a little higher and looked toward the shore. Figures were gathering on the bank. They were carrying nets. In that moment, something stirred in the first fish. It was not fear, not exactly. It was more like a veil lifting, a sudden clarity that moved through her like light through clear water. She understood, with a knowing that went beyond ordinary thought, that change had come to the lake. The home she had always known was about to transform into something else entirely. But she remembered something too. She remembered the stories the old ones used to tell, stories most fish dismissed as legends or fantasies. Stories of an underground passage that led away from the lake through quiet darkness to something called the ocean. A body of water so vast that it had no edges, no boundaries, no end. A place of infinite space and endless peace. The first fish did not hesitate. She understood that her friends, dear as they were, loved this place too deeply to leave quickly. They would want to discuss, to consider, to wait and see. And she sensed that waiting was no longer wise. The Buddha once said, "An idea that is developed and put into action is more important than an idea that exists only as an idea." The first fish understood this in her bones. Understanding without action is not yet complete understanding. So she turned away from the surface, away from her companions, away from everything familiar. She swam down, gently down, into the deeper part of the lake, where the water grew cool and the light softened to a dim blue glow. There, hidden among smooth stones and soft silt, she found what she was looking for. A rounded opening in the lake floor, the entrance to the passage. The journey asked much of her. The passage was narrow and winding, and she had to move slowly, feeling her way through the darkness. The water tasted different here, older somehow, full of minerals from deep in the earth. Sometimes the passage opened into small caverns where she could pause and rest, floating in the quiet dark. Sometimes it narrowed, and she had to move with patience and care. But through it all, she held in her heart the image of boundless water, of freedom, of a home that had no walls. And she kept swimming, gently, steadily, trusting the passage to lead her where she needed to go. After what seemed like a very long time, something began to change. The darkness grew softer. The water began to taste different, cleaner, alive with salt and the freshness of open space. The passage widened. And then, like waking gently from a deep sleep, she emerged. The first thing she noticed was the light. It came from everywhere, filtering down through water so clear and blue that it seemed to glow from within. The second thing she noticed was the space. She turned in a slow, wandering circle, and in every direction there was only water. No shore, no boundary, no edge, only vastness stretching out in all directions, holding her as gently as a mother holds a sleeping child. She had found the ocean. For a long time, she simply floated there, letting the soft current move her, feeling the salt water flow over her like a blessing. Everything she had left behind seemed very far away now, like a dream she had once had and then woken from. In its place was only this, only vastness, only peace. She was home. Back at the lake, the second fish had watched his friend disappear into the depths. He had seen the figures on the shore. He had understood, in some part of himself, what was happening. But he had not moved. Now, as the nets began to spread across the water, he felt a wave of regret wash through him. Why had he not followed? Why had he waited? His guide was gone, and now he was alone with his own hesitation. The nets were drawing closer. He could feel the subtle change in the water's movement. There was no time to reach the deep passage now. It was too far. He had waited too long. But the second fish, though he had missed his first opportunity, had a certain quiet resourcefulness. In this moment of uncertainty, a memory came to him. Something an old fish had once said about the wisdom of stillness and surrender. Sometimes the Old One had said, the only way forward is to stop moving altogether. Sometimes we must let go of everything, even our need to act, to find our way through. And so the second fish did something unexpected. He stopped swimming. He let his body grow soft and still. He turned gently onto his side and allowed himself to float to the surface, drifting like a leaf, like a piece of wood, like something that had already let go. One of the figures on the shore noticed him floating there and waded over to look. A hand lifted him from the water and examined him briefly. The fish remained perfectly still, soft and quiet, offering no resistance. After a moment, the figure made a sound of disinterest and set him down in the shallow water near the reeds, turning back to look for others. The second fish lay very still in the shallows, feeling the soft mud beneath him, the gentle lapping of water around his body. He waited, patient as a stone, as the figures moved away. Only when everything had grown quiet did he allow himself to stir. Slowly, gently, he began to move toward deeper water. Little by little, with no hurry, he made his way back into the lake, then deeper still, until at last he found the hidden passage his friend had taken. His journey to the ocean was longer than hers had been, for he moved slowly and rested often. But the passage held him gently, and in time, he too emerged into boundless waters where the light was soft and the space went on forever. And there, in that vastness, his friend was waiting to welcome him home. The third fish, meanwhile, had seen everything. He had seen his first friend disappear. He had seen the second friend float and then slip away. And all the while, he had been swimming back and forth, certain that he could find another way out. Surely there was an option they had missed. Surely there was some quick movement, some clever route that his active mind could discover. He had always relied on his own energy and determination. They had never failed him before. Why should this moment be any different? He searched along the edges of the lake, looking for gaps. He swam in quick circles, testing possibilities. He could not bring himself to stop, to be still, to consider that perhaps effort alone was not the answer. And so, despite all his movement, despite all his determination, he found himself caught. As he rested in the stillness that followed, a new kind of clarity came to him. All his activity had not brought him freedom. All his certainty in his own abilities had led him here, to this quiet moment of surrender he had tried so hard to avoid. But even in this stillness, something opened. He saw, for the first time, what he had been unwilling to see before. The lake had never truly been safety. It had only been familiar. And his refusal to question the familiar, his endless circling within known waters, had kept him from discovering what lay beyond. In that moment of quiet seeing, he made a vow. If life offers me another chance, he thought, I will not make my home in small waters. I will seek the vastness. I will make boundless space my dwelling place. And some say that this vow, made in perfect stillness and surrender, was the very thing that opened a door he had not seen before. Some say that he too, in the end, found his way to the ocean. For the heart that truly lets go, the teachers tell us, always finds its way home. This story has been told for centuries because it speaks to something true about the human heart. We are, most of us, like these fish. We have made our home in the lake of our thoughts. The waters are familiar. We know every current of worry, every eddy of desire, every quiet corner where old habits like to gather. We have swum these waters so many times that we could navigate them without thinking. In fact, we often do, moving through the same patterns day after day, year after year, without ever pausing to wonder if there might be something more. But the ancient teachers remind us that there is an ocean. There is a vastness beyond the boundaries of our habitual thinking. And the journey there, though it asks us to move into unfamiliar waters, though it invites us to release our grip on everything we thought we knew, is the journey we were born to make. The Zen masters called this vast awareness big mind or original nature. The Buddha called it nirvana, which means simply the end of grasping, the end of the tight holding that keeps us circling in small waters. They taught that this boundless peace is not something we need to create or achieve. It is what we already are, beneath the surface of our busy minds. We have simply forgotten, like fish who have never thought to question the edges of their lake. As one teacher expressed it beautifully, we are like waves that have forgotten they are water. Consider this for a moment. A wave rises from the ocean, takes shape for a little while, catches the light, curves and softens, and then dissolves back into the depths from which it came. For the brief time it exists, the wave might believe itself to be separate, a distinct thing with its own identity and boundaries. It might notice other waves and feel different from them, or similar to them, or alone among them. But the wave was never truly separate. It was always water. It was always the ocean, expressing itself in one temporary, beautiful form. The wave's sense of separate existence was not wrong, exactly, but it was incomplete. It was a partial truth that had forgotten the whole. This is our situation as well. Our thoughts, our emotions, our sense of being a separate self with a personal history and a private future, these arise like waves from the vast ocean of awareness. They are real, in their way. They are part of our experience, and they deserve to be honored and gently held. But they are not the whole of what we are. And when we mistake the wave for the totality of our being, we feel small and limited and alone. But to remember that we are the ocean, to rest in the awareness that holds all waves, all thoughts, all experiences, this is the beginning of freedom. This is what the Buddha meant when he spoke of liberation. Not an escape from life, not a rejection of experience, but a homecoming to the fullness of what we have always been. The first fish in our story knew something important. She knew that it is right to love your home place, but wise to ask first, where is home really? This question is not meant to create doubt or worry. It is not a rejection of the life you are living or the circumstances you find yourself in. It is simply an invitation to consider whether the small, familiar waters of your habitual thinking might be like a lake that has forgotten the ocean. An invitation to remember that you are not just a wave, but the entire sea taking temporary form. Many of us have had moments when the walls of our usual world seem to soften or become transparent. Perhaps it happened in nature, when you stood in a place of great beauty and suddenly felt the boundary between yourself and the world grow very thin. In that moment, there was no separation between the one who looked and what was seen. There was only looking, only presence, only this. Perhaps it happened in a moment of deep love, when you looked into another's eyes and knew, without words, that the space between you was not a barrier, but a bridge. You were not two separate beings who had managed to connect. You were one awareness, resting in itself, seeing itself through two pairs of eyes. Perhaps it happened in a moment of great tenderness, when life asked you to open beyond what you thought you could hold. In that open place, you touched something real beneath all the stories. You found, perhaps to your surprise, that even in the midst of great feeling, there was a stillness that could hold it all, a vastness that could embrace everything. These moments are glimpses of the ocean. They are soft reminders that the lake is not all there is. They are invitations to swim a little deeper, to rest a little more completely, to discover the boundless home that has been waiting for you all along. The spiritual path is simply the practice of turning toward these glimpses, honoring them, learning from them, and allowing them, slowly and gently, to transform the way we move through our days. Let us pause for a moment now. Take a slow, deep breath, and when you are ready, we will continue together. In the story of the three fish, we discovered something important. We discovered that the small, familiar lake of our habitual thinking is not the whole of what we are. There is an ocean. There is a vastness that has been waiting for us all along, patient and welcoming, ready to receive us whenever we are ready to swim beyond the shores we know. But here a question naturally arises. If freedom is so close, if the ocean is always available, why do we spend so much of our lives circling in small waters? What keeps us swimming in the same patterns, day after day, returning again and again to the same worries, the same fears, the same well-worn grooves of thought? This is what we will explore together now. We will look gently at the nature of the thinking mind. We will discover why some thoughts seem to hold us so tightly, while others drift past like clouds on a summer afternoon. And in this looking, in this gentle seeing, we will find the beginning of a deeper freedom. Have you ever noticed how some thoughts move through the mind like leaves floating down a stream? They appear, they drift past, and then they are gone, leaving barely a ripple behind. You might notice them, or you might not. Either way, they do not disturb your peace. They are simply part of the natural movement of the mind, as unremarkable as breath. But then there are other thoughts. Thoughts that arrive and do not leave. Thoughts that circle back again and again, no matter how many times you try to set them down. Thoughts that seem to have a kind of weight to them, a stickiness, as if they were coated in something that makes them cling to the walls of your awareness. These are what the teachers call sticky thoughts. And if you look closely, if you observe them with gentle curiosity, you will notice something interesting about them. Almost without exception, they share a common quality. They arise from a feeling that something is not quite right. They are born from a subtle sense that something needs to be fixed, or avoided, or figured out. They carry within them the quiet hum of worry. The Buddha spoke often about this. He observed that the thinking mind is not neutral. It does not simply reflect reality as it is. Instead, it arises in response to a feeling of dissatisfaction, a sense that this moment is somehow incomplete. Something is missing. Something is threatening. Something needs to be different than it is. And so the mind begins to spin. It tries to solve the problem. It tries to plan a way forward or review what went wrong. It reaches into the future, rehearsing conversations that have not yet happened, imagining scenarios that may never come to pass. It reaches into the past, replaying events that are already complete, searching for answers that cannot be found there. This is the nature of the sticky mind. It is always trying to get somewhere else. It is always trying to make things other than they are. And because reality keeps changing, because life keeps presenting new situations and new challenges, the mind never quite arrives at the peace it seeks. It simply keeps spinning, caught in its own web of thought. There is a beautiful image that comes to us from the Zen tradition. It speaks of the mind as a vast, open sky. Thoughts, in this image, are like clouds. They form out of nothing, drift across the blue expanse, and then dissolve again into emptiness. Some clouds are light and wispy, barely there at all. Others are thick and dark, heavy with rain. But no matter what kind of cloud appears, the sky itself remains unchanged. It is not disturbed by the clouds. It does not try to push them away or hold them in place. It simply allows them to pass, knowing that its own nature is far vaster than anything that moves through it. This is what the teachers invite us to discover. Not a mind empty of thoughts, for that is neither possible nor necessary, but a mind that has remembered its true nature as sky. A mind that can hold all thoughts, all feelings, all experiences, without being caught by any of them. But how do we find our way to this sky-like awareness? How do we loosen the grip of the sticky thoughts that seem to hold us so tightly? The first step, the teachers tell us, is simply to notice, to become aware that we are thinking. This may sound obvious, but in truth, we spend vast portions of our lives lost in thought without any awareness that it is happening. We are so identified with our thoughts, so completely absorbed in the stories they tell, that we do not even realize there is another possibility. The Buddha called this foundation of practice mindfulness of mind. He taught that simply by becoming aware of our thoughts, simply by recognizing that thinking is happening, we create a small space of freedom. In that moment of recognition, we are no longer completely inside the thought. We have stepped back just a little, and we can see it for what it is. A cloud passing through the sky, a wave rising in the ocean. Not the whole of reality, but just one small part of it. This is why the practice of meditation often begins with such a simple instruction. Sit quietly, follow the breath, and when you notice that the mind has wandered into thought, simply recognize that this has happened and gently return your attention to the present moment. There is no failure in this practice. The mind will wander, thoughts will arise. This is not a problem to be solved. It is simply the nature of the mind, as natural as the rising and falling of waves. What matters is the moment of recognition, the moment when we wake up, even briefly, from the dream of thought. Each time this happens, we are strengthening our capacity to rest in awareness. We are learning, little by little, to be the sky rather than the clouds. Let us look a little more closely at these sticky thoughts, these clouds that seem so reluctant to pass. If you observe your own mind with gentleness and patience, you will likely notice certain patterns. You may notice that many of your thoughts fall into one of two categories. There are thoughts about the future, and there are thoughts about the past. The thoughts about the future often take the form of planning or worrying. The mind reaches forward, trying to anticipate what might happen, trying to prepare for every possibility. It rehearses conversations, imagining what you will say and what the other person might say in return. It plays out scenarios, some hopeful and some fearful, trying to find its way to safety and success. Perhaps you know this experience. You are lying in bed at night, and the mind begins to review tomorrow. It thinks about the tasks that need to be done, the people who need to be contacted, the problems that need to be solved. It circles through the same list again and again, as if repetition alone could guarantee that nothing will be forgotten, that nothing will go wrong. Or perhaps the mind reaches even further, into a future that is still uncertain. It wonders about decisions that have not yet been made. It worries about outcomes that cannot yet be known. It tries to plan for events that may never happen, building elaborate structures of thought to contain a future that remains, as all futures do, essentially unknowable. Then there are the thoughts about the past. The mind reaches backward, replaying events that have already unfolded, examining conversations that have already ended. It searches for meaning in what happened, for lessons to be learned, for mistakes to be identified and avoided next time. It rehearses what you should have said, what you wish you had done differently, what you hope you will remember if a similar situation ever arises again. This backward reaching of the mind can feel productive. It can seem like wisdom, like learning from experience. And sometimes it is. But often, if we look closely, we can see that it is simply another form of worry. The mind is trying to undo what cannot be undone. It is trying to find certainty in situations that have already passed beyond our control. Between these two movements, the reaching forward and the reaching back, very little space remains for the present moment. Very little attention is available for what is actually happening right now, in this breath, in this body, in this room where you are resting. And this, the teachers tell us, is the source of much of our suffering. Not the events of our lives themselves, but the way the mind carries them, turning them over and over, refusing to let them rest. There is a story that comes to us from an ancient monastery set among mountains in a land far away. Two monks were walking together along a muddy road after a heavy rain. As they approached a village, they came upon a woman standing at the edge of a large puddle. She was dressed in fine robes that she clearly did not want to muddy, and she seemed uncertain how to cross. Without a word, the older monk walked over, lifted the woman gently in his arms, and carried her across the puddle. He set her down on the dry ground on the other side, bowed slightly, and continued walking. The woman thanked him and went on her way. The two monks walked on in silence. But the younger monk was troubled. In their tradition, monks were not supposed to touch women, especially not to hold them so closely. He could not stop thinking about what had happened. The scene played in his mind again and again. The older monk's arms around the woman, her body pressed against his robes. The casual way he had set her down, as if it were nothing. For hours they walked, and for hours the younger monk churned with these thoughts. Finally, as evening approached and they neared their monastery, he could contain himself no longer. "Brother," he said, "how could you carry that woman? You know that we are not permitted to touch women. How could you hold her like that?" The older monk turned and looked at him with gentle eyes. "I set that woman down hours ago," he said. "Why are you still carrying her?" This simple story points to something profound about the nature of sticky thoughts. The event itself, the carrying of the woman, lasted only a few moments. It arose, it passed, and then it was complete. But in the mind of the younger monk, it continued for hours. He was still carrying something that had already been set down. He was still troubled by something that was already over. This is what we do with so many of our experiences. The moment passes, but we continue to carry it. We replay it, examine it, judge it, regret it. We construct elaborate stories about what it meant and what it says about us and what we should do differently next time. And all the while, life continues to unfold around us, offering new moments, new experiences, new opportunities for presence. But we miss them because we are still carrying what has already passed. The older monk in the story had learned something that the younger monk had not yet discovered. He had learned how to set things down. He had learned that wisdom lies not in avoiding experience, but in allowing it to complete itself, in letting each moment arise fully, be met fully, and then pass away fully, without clinging, without resistance, without the endless commentary of the thinking mind. This is what the Buddha called non-attachment. It is not coldness or indifference. It is not a withdrawal from life or a refusal to care. It is simply the wisdom of knowing when something is complete, the wisdom of setting down what has already passed, the wisdom of opening your hands and your heart to what is actually here, now, in this moment. We might wonder why the mind holds on so tightly. Why do we carry what has already passed? Why do we reach so anxiously toward what has not yet arrived? The teachers tell us that underneath all our sticky thoughts, underneath all our planning and worrying and rehearsing and reviewing, there is a single root, and that root is a feeling of not being quite safe, a subtle sense that something is wrong, or something is missing, or something threatens us that we must prepare for. This is the mood of fear. Not always the sharp, obvious fear that comes when danger is present, but a quieter, more pervasive unease. A background hum of anxiety that colors everything. A sense that we are not quite okay, that the world is not quite okay, that we must stay vigilant if we are to survive. From this feeling, the sticky thoughts arise. The mind is trying to protect us. It is scanning for threats, planning for dangers, reviewing past mistakes so that we will not make them again. In its own way, it is trying to take care of us. It is trying to ensure our safety in what it perceives as an uncertain and potentially hostile world. When we understand this, something softens in our relationship with the thinking mind. We can begin to meet it with compassion rather than frustration. We can recognize that our worries, our anxieties, our endless mental chatter, all of this arises from a part of us that is simply trying to help. It is misguided, perhaps. Its methods are often not very effective, but its intention, in its own limited way, is to keep us safe. And when we bring this understanding, this compassion to our sticky thoughts, something interesting happens. The thoughts begin to lose some of their power. They do not disappear entirely. The clouds still form, still drift across the sky, but we are not so caught by them. We can see them for what they are. We can hold them with gentleness, the way a parent holds a frightened child. We can say, quietly, in the depths of our being, "Thank you for trying to protect me. I see you. I understand. And I am safe. I am okay. In this moment, right now, I am okay." The great Zen teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, once offered a simple practice for working with difficult thoughts and feelings. He suggested that when we notice anxiety arising, when we feel the grip of sticky thoughts, we can pause and say to ourselves, very gently. Breathing in, I know that fear is in me. Breathing out, I smile to my fear. This is not a way of pushing fear away or pretending it does not exist. It is a way of acknowledging what is present while also creating space around it. The smile is not a denial. It is a softening. It is an invitation for awareness to hold what is arising, rather than being swept away by it. In this simple practice, we begin to change our relationship with our thoughts. We move from being lost inside them to being the awareness that holds them. We move from being the wave to being the ocean. And in that transition, however brief, we taste the freedom that is always available. As we rest here together, let us take a moment to notice what is happening in the mind right now. Perhaps there are thoughts moving through. Perhaps there are worries or plans or memories drifting across the open space of your awareness. This is natural. This is the mind doing what minds do. Can you notice these thoughts without trying to change them? Can you observe them with the gentle curiosity of someone watching clouds pass across a wide blue sky? You do not need to stop your thoughts. You do not need to empty your mind or achieve some special state. You simply need to remember that you are the sky, not the clouds. You are the ocean, not the waves. You are the awareness in which all experience arises and passes away. The Buddha said, "Nothing is to be clung to as I, me, or mine." This does not mean that we must reject our thoughts or fight against them. It simply means that we do not have to believe that they are the whole of who we are. We can let them come. We can let them go. And through it all, we can rest in the vast, peaceful awareness that is our true home. There is a practice, very simple and very profound, that can help us loosen the grip of sticky thoughts. It requires nothing but a moment of attention, a gentle awareness. When you notice that you are caught in thinking, when you realize that the mind has been spinning in its familiar patterns, you can pause and ask yourself a simple question: where am I right now? Not where is my mind, wandering in past or future, but where am I, this body, this breath, this awareness, right now, in this moment. And then you can notice the feeling of your body resting, the sensation of breath moving in and out, the sounds around you, near and far, the quality of light even behind closed eyes, the simple fact of being here, present, aware. This is the doorway out of sticky thoughts. Not fighting them, not analyzing them, not trying to figure out why they are there. Simply returning again and again to the present moment, to what is actually here, to this breath, this body, this now. Each time we do this, each time we wake up from the dream of thought and return to presence, we are practicing freedom. We are remembering the sky. We are finding our way back to the ocean. Let us pause for a moment here. Let the thoughts that may still be moving through the mind simply be there, like clouds drifting across a vast and peaceful sky. And when you are ready, we will continue together, exploring how we can meet even the most tender places within us with the gentle light of awareness. We have been discovering the nature of the thinking mind. We have seen how thoughts can become sticky, how they can circle and return, how they arise from a subtle feeling that something is not quite right and needs to be fixed. We have begun to remember that we are not our thoughts, that we are the vast sky in which all clouds pass, the deep ocean in which all waves rise and fall. Now we turn to explore something equally important. We turn to look at what we miss when we are lost in the world of thought. What slips past us, unnoticed, while the mind is busy elsewhere. What gifts life offers that we cannot receive because our hands are too full of worry to hold anything new. This is a tender exploration. It is not meant to create regret or self-criticism. It is simply an invitation to see clearly, with compassion, the cost of living in the small world of our thoughts. And in that seeing, to open ourselves to something more. There is a story about someone who learned this lesson in a surprising way. This person was preparing for an important examination. It was the kind of test that felt like a doorway, a passage from one chapter of life into another. Everything seemed to depend on it. Success meant moving forward into a longed-for future. Failure meant disappointment, delay, perhaps having to reconsider the entire path. And so this person did what many of us do when something feels important. They gave themselves completely to preparation. They gathered books and notes and study materials until the desk was covered, until every surface in the room held some piece of information that might be needed. They read and memorized and reviewed, hour after hour, day after day, until the world beyond the window seemed very far away. At first, this felt productive. It felt like dedication, like commitment, like doing what needed to be done. But as the days passed and the examination drew closer, something began to change. The focus that had once felt empowering began to feel like a trap. The mind, instead of growing clearer, grew more cluttered. Worry crept in, then anxiety, then a kind of constant, low-level unease that colored everything. The examination board, the distant authority that would judge this person's worthiness, began to feel like an enemy. The test itself began to seem like something designed to catch mistakes, to expose inadequacies, to reveal all the ways this person was not quite good enough. The world, which had once felt friendly and full of possibility, now seemed hostile and threatening. And as this feeling grew, something happened to the rest of life. It began to fall away. Small things at first. The morning walk that had once been a source of refreshment was abandoned because there was no time. Meals became hurried, forgettable, eaten standing at the counter, or not eaten at all. Friends called and their voices on the phone felt like interruptions, distractions from the urgent work of preparation. The body, that faithful companion, began to send quiet signals, asking for attention. There was tension gathering in the shoulders, a tightness settling into the jaw, a weariness behind the eyes. But these signals went unheard. There was no room for the body. There was only room for the mind and its endless work. Even the small rituals of self-care began to feel like burdens. Simple things that had once been automatic now seemed like luxuries that could not be afforded. Taking a walk in the fresh air, preparing a proper meal with care and attention, calling a friend just to hear their voice, resting without guilt. All of these fell away, sacrificed to the great project of preparation. The person began to live in a kind of tunnel. The walls were made of worry. The floor was made of fear. And at the end, always receding, was the examination, the great trial that would determine everything. Nothing else seemed real. Nothing else seemed to matter. And all the while, the world outside continued on. Spring arrived, but went unnoticed. Flowers bloomed in gardens, but there was no time to see them. Birds sang their morning songs, but there was no attention left to hear them. Neighbors waved and smiled, but they seemed like figures in a distant dream. Life was happening, rich and beautiful and full, but this person had withdrawn from it entirely, retreating into the small, anxious world of thought. One afternoon, the telephone rang. By this point, every phone call had become an irritation. Every interruption felt like a threat, pulling attention away from the vital work of preparation. So when this call came, the person answered with impatience, already planning how to end the conversation quickly and return to studying. A voice on the other end asked a few questions, confirmed a name, an age, a few other details. Then the voice said something unexpected. "Congratulations. You have won a trip to the islands." The person on the other end of the line paused, certain they had misheard. "I am sorry, what did you say?" "You have won a trip. A voyage to the islands. All expenses paid. You entered a drawing at a festival, and your name was selected." But this made no sense. This person had not been to any festival. They had been here, in this room, with these books, for what felt like forever. The world had become the enemy, full of tricks and traps and tests. Good things did not simply arrive out of nowhere. There had to be a catch, a scheme, something to be wary of. "No, thank you," they said. "I am not interested." The voice on the phone tried to explain further, offering more details, more assurances. But the person had already decided. This was a distraction, a trick. Nothing good could be coming their way. They ended the call and returned to their books, shaking their head at the strangeness of it all. It was only hours later, through a conversation with a family member, that the truth emerged. The person had indeed won the trip. A loved one had entered their name in a drawing at a community gathering, a small act of kindness meant as a surprise. The prize was real. The gift was genuine. Someone who cared about them had thought of them, had wanted to give them something beautiful. But because this person had been so lost in the world of worry, so convinced that the universe was hostile and full of threats, they had not been able to receive it. They had turned away a gift that was freely offered, simply because they could not believe that anything good was possible. When we hear this story, we might smile with recognition. We might see ourselves in it. We might remember times when we, too, were so caught up in worry that we could not receive what was being offered. This story is not really about a trip to the islands. It is about something much more important. It is about what happens when we become so lost in our thoughts that we lose touch with the rest of our being. It is about what we miss when the mind becomes the only part of us that we inhabit. It is about the gifts that life offers, moment after moment, that we cannot receive because we are not truly here to receive them. The Buddha spoke of this when he taught about the importance of presence. He observed that most human beings are so caught up in memories of the past and anticipations of the future that they miss the only moment that is actually real. This moment, this breath, this simple experience of being alive. Do not dwell in the past, the Buddha said. Do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment. This is not a teaching about productivity or efficiency. It is a teaching about being fully alive. Because life does not happen in our thoughts about the past. Life does not happen in our plans for the future. Life happens here, now, in the sensations of the body, in the sounds and sights and textures of this present moment. And when we are lost in thought, we miss it. We miss the only life we actually have. There is an old word in Chinese for busyness. When written, it combines two symbols. One means heart. The other means killing. Busyness is heart killing. This is not a criticism. It is simply an observation made with great compassion about what happens when we give ourselves completely to the world of thought and activity. We begin to lose touch with the heart. We begin to forget that we have a body. We begin to treat our deepest selves as inconveniences, as obstacles to be managed, as problems to be solved, so that we can get on with the important work of thinking and doing. But the heart is not an obstacle. The body is not a problem. They are doorways to presence. They are the very means by which we can receive the gifts that life offers. When we are disconnected from the body, we cannot feel the simple pleasure of a deep breath. We cannot notice the warmth of sunlight on skin, the satisfaction of stretching tired muscles, the comfort of a soft place to rest. These small gifts are always available, offered freely, moment after moment. But when we live only in the mind, we cannot receive them. We do not even know they are being offered. When we are disconnected from the heart, we cannot feel the love that others offer us. We cannot receive their kindness, their care, their desire to help. Every phone call becomes an interruption. Every gesture of affection becomes a demand. We are too busy, too preoccupied, too lost in our own worries to let anyone in. The people who love us reach toward us, and we do not even notice their hands. And when we are disconnected from the world around us, we cannot feel our belonging to it. We forget that we are part of something larger. We forget that the earth is holding us, that the air is breathing us, that the sun is warming us, that we are woven into a web of life so vast and so beautiful that it would take our breath away if we could only pause long enough to notice. There is a teaching that comes to us from the indigenous peoples of many lands. It speaks of the importance of staying connected to the earth, to the rhythms of nature, to the living world that sustains us. One elder from a native tradition once observed something about the people who had come to his land from far away. He noticed that they seemed troubled, anxious, always rushing from one thing to the next. He noticed that they did not seem to feel at home in the world, even though the world was offering them everything they needed. He suggested that perhaps they were troubled by fears that came from being disconnected, from having pulled away from the natural world, from living in their minds instead of in their bodies, in their plans instead of in the present moment. They had forgotten, he said, that the earth was their mother, that the sky was their father, that they belonged here as surely as the birds and the trees and the rivers. When we are disconnected in this way, he observed, we begin to lose our ability to listen. We cannot hear the subtle messages that the body sends us about what it needs. We cannot hear the quiet invitations that life offers us. We cannot hear the wisdom that arises when the mind grows still. We become like someone who has covered their ears and then wonders why the world seems so silent. And when we cannot listen, we cannot respond wisely. We make choices that do not serve us. We ignore our need for rest, for nourishment, for connection. We push ourselves past the point of ease, past the point of joy, into a kind of grim determination that leaves us exhausted and empty. This is not a moral failing. It is simply what happens when we lose touch with ourselves. And the remedy is not to try harder, not to push through, not to redouble our efforts. The remedy is gentler than that. It is simply to come back, to return to the body, to settle into the present moment, to listen again to the quiet wisdom that is always available when we are still enough to hear it. So what do we miss when we are lost in thought? We miss the springtime, not as an idea, not as a word on a calendar, but as a lived experience. The softening of the air after a long winter, the first green shoots pushing up through dark soil, the songs of birds returning from their long journeys, the way the light changes, growing warmer, lasting longer, inviting us to linger outside. Spring comes every year, faithful and generous, but how many springs have we missed because we were somewhere else in our minds? We miss the faces of the people we love. Not their images, which we might recall from memory, but their living presence. The way their eyes change when they see us. The small movements in their expressions that reveal what they are feeling. The warmth of their company, which asks nothing of us except that we be here, present, available. Our loved ones are with us for such a short time, really. And yet how often are we truly with them, truly present to the gift of their being? We miss our own bodies. The miracle of breath that continues without our effort, sustaining us moment after moment. The steady beating of the heart, faithful and tireless, working on our behalf, whether we notice or not. The sensations of being alive, the subtle pleasures that are always available when we remember to notice them. The body is always here, always now, always offering us a doorway back to presence. But so often we are elsewhere, lost in thought, treating the body as merely a vehicle for the mind. We miss the sky, the stars at night, ancient light traveling vast distances to reach our eyes. The moon in its patient cycles, waxing and waning, tugging at the tides and at something deep within us. The clouds in their endless creativity, forming and dissolving, painting pictures that will never be repeated. The sky is always there, above us and around us, offering beauty and perspective and space. But when did we last really look at it? We miss the simple joy of being. Not doing, not achieving, not preparing for some future moment when we will finally be allowed to rest. Just being. Here, now, alive. This breath, this heartbeat, this awareness. This is the most precious gift of all, and it is always being offered. But we are often too busy to receive it. The Buddha called this kind of presence right mindfulness. It is one of the steps on the path to freedom. Not because there is something wrong with thinking, but because thinking alone is not enough. To be fully human, to be fully alive, we must also be present. We must inhabit our bodies. We must open our hearts. We must feel our connection to the earth and to each other. There is a poem from an ancient sage that speaks to this beautifully. It says, "The great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. When love and hate are both absent, everything becomes clear and undisguised. Make the smallest distinction, however, and heaven and earth are set infinitely apart. When we are lost in thought, we are constantly making distinctions. This is good, that is bad. This should happen, that should not. This is a gift, that is a threat. And in all this distinguishing, we lose the simple openness that allows us to receive what is actually here. But when we return to presence, when we settle into the body and open to the moment, these distinctions begin to soften. We start to see that everything is offering itself to us. The breath is a gift. The heartbeat is a gift. The quiet is a gift. Even the difficulties, even the challenges, even the things we would not have chosen, these too are part of the great offering that is this life. We do not need to like everything. We do not need to pretend that hard things are easy. We simply need to be here, open, present, willing to receive what is given. This is what the person in our story could not do. They could not receive the gift that was offered because they had already decided that nothing good was coming. They had closed themselves off, retreated into the small world of worry, and in that closed state, even a genuine gift looked like a trick. But we can learn from this. We can notice when we have closed down, when we have retreated into thought, when we have forgotten that life is generous and kind. And in that noticing, something naturally begins to soften. The heart opens, just a little. The breath deepens, just a little. And we find ourselves, without effort, a little more available to what is being offered. Let's pause for a moment now. Take a slow, gentle breath. And when you are ready, we will continue together. We have explored the nature of sticky thoughts and the gifts we miss when we are lost in the world of the mind. We have begun to see how worry and anxiety can close us off from life, making us unable to receive even the most genuine offerings. Now we turn to something tender. We turn to look at the roots of our relationship with fear. Not to analyze or fix anything, but simply to understand, with great compassion, how we came to be the way we are. How we learned, long before we had words for it, to respond to the fears that arose within us. And how, in understanding this, we might begin to hold ourselves with more kindness. This is gentle territory. We will walk through it slowly, with care, the way one might walk through a garden in the early morning, noticing what grows there without needing to change anything. Long before we could speak, we knew fear. It is one of the first things a human being experiences. The startle of a loud sound, the sudden absence of a familiar face, the feeling of falling, of being unsupported, of not knowing what comes next. These primal fears are woven into us from the very beginning, part of the ancient wisdom of the body that has kept our kind alive for countless generations. As infants, we had no way to understand these feelings. We could not name them or make sense of them. We could only feel them, vast and overwhelming, moving through our tiny bodies like storms. And in those moments, we looked to the faces around us. We looked to see how we should respond. We looked for clues about whether we were safe, whether we would be okay, whether someone would help us find our way back to calm. This is how we learned about fear. Not through lessons spoken aloud, but through the responses we received, through the tone of voice that answered our cries, through the hands that did or did not reach for us, through the faces that showed us in 1,000 subtle ways what fear meant and how it should be handled. The Buddha understood this deeply. He taught that we are shaped by our experiences, that the patterns of our minds are formed through repetition, through the responses we receive and the responses we learn to give. We are what we think, he said. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. And so, as children, we made a world. We made a world of beliefs about fear, about ourselves, about what was safe and what was dangerous. We made this world not through choice, but through necessity, through the simple need to survive and make sense of our experience. Let us imagine, for a moment, a child standing at the edge of a dark room. Perhaps it is a closet, or a basement stairway, or simply a corner of the house where the light does not reach. The child stands at the threshold, peering into the shadows, and feels something stir within. A quickening of the heart, a tightening of the belly, the ancient response of the body to the unknown. This is not a problem. This is simply what happens when a young being encounters darkness. The fear is natural, appropriate, even wise. It is the body's way of saying, pay attention. Something unfamiliar is here. What happens next, however, will shape this child's relationship with fear for years to come. In one version of the story, an adult notices the child's hesitation and comes to stand beside them. The adult does not rush the child or dismiss their concern. Instead, they simply acknowledge what is happening. That does look dark, they might say. It can feel a little scary, looking into a place where you cannot see. The adult does not try to fix the fear or make it go away. They simply let the child know that the fear is seen, that it is understood, that it is part of being human. In this response, the child learns something precious. They learn that fear is not shameful. They learn that it is possible to feel afraid and still be okay. They learn that fear can be met with presence, with understanding, with kindness. And this learning settles into the child's being like a seed, waiting to grow into a capacity for meeting their own fears with the same gentleness. But there are other versions of this story, other ways the adult might respond. And each of these leaves a different imprint on the child's tender heart. Sometimes, the adult denies the fear entirely. There is nothing to be afraid of, they say, perhaps with a wave of the hand, perhaps with a hint of impatience. There is nothing in there. Do not be silly. The words are meant to reassure. The adult may genuinely believe they are helping. But to the child, the message lands differently. The child is feeling something real, something vivid and undeniable in their body. And now they are being told that this feeling is wrong, that it should not exist, that there is no reason for it. A small confusion enters the child's world. Am I supposed to trust what I feel or what I am told? If there is nothing to be afraid of, why does my body feel this way? Is something wrong with me? The fear does not go away. It simply goes underground, joined now by a layer of doubt. The child learns to distrust their own experience, to question their own perceptions, to wonder if what they feel is real or imaginary. Sometimes, the adult ignores the fear altogether. Perhaps they are busy with other things. Perhaps they do not notice the child standing at the edge of the darkness. Perhaps they notice, but do not think it important enough to address. Children have fears all the time, after all. They will grow out of it. And so the child stands alone, heart beating fast, with no one to help them make sense of what they feel. The fear does not go away. It simply becomes something private, something that must be carried alone. The child learns that their inner world is not interesting to others, that their feelings are not worth attending to, that they must figure things out by themselves. A small loneliness enters the child's world, a sense that the depths of their experience are not shareable, not important, not welcome in the space between themselves and others. Sometimes, the adult shames the fear. "Do not be such a baby," they might say, or "You are too old to be afraid of the dark." The words carry a sting, a suggestion that fear is not just unnecessary but embarrassing, a sign of weakness or immaturity. To a child, this is deeply confusing. The fear is there, as real and present as the floor beneath their feet. But now it comes with a judgment, a label, a sense that feeling this way makes them less than they should be. The child does not stop feeling afraid. They simply add another layer to the fear of being seen as afraid. Now they must hide what they feel, must pretend to be braver than they are, must present a face to the world that does not match what is happening inside. A small split occurs, a gap between the inner experience and the outer presentation. And this split can last a lifetime, the habit of hiding our fears, of pretending we are fine when we are not, of believing that our vulnerability is something to be ashamed of rather than something to be held with tenderness. Sometimes, without meaning to, the adult feeds the fear. "Be careful," they say, with a worried look. It is a dangerous world. You never know what might happen. The words come from love, from a desire to protect, but they carry a message about the nature of reality. The world is threatening. You are not safe. You must always be on guard. The child absorbs this message, not just through words, but through tone, through expression, through the subtle ways the adult's own anxiety communicates itself. Fear becomes not just a response to the unknown, but a way of relating to life itself. The world becomes a place of hidden dangers. Trust becomes difficult. Relaxation becomes rare. And the child learns, without anyone intending to teach them, that life is something to be defended against, rather than open to. These are just a few of the ways we learn about fear in childhood. There are countless variations, countless small moments that shape us in ways we may never fully trace. What matters is not to catalogue them all or to assign blame for how we were raised. What matters is simply to understand, with compassion, that we were shaped. We did not choose the responses we received. We did not choose the lessons we absorbed. We were small and new to the world, and we learned what we were taught. And now, as adults, we carry these teachings with us. They live in our bodies, in the way we tense or relax in the face of uncertainty. They live in our minds, in the stories we tell ourselves about what we can and cannot handle. They live in our hearts, in the ways we open to or close against our own vulnerability. This is not a problem to be solved. It is simply the truth of being human. We are shaped by our histories. And in understanding this, we can begin to hold ourselves with more kindness. The Buddha spoke of something he called the second arrow. He said that when something difficult happens to us, it is like being struck by an arrow. There is pain, yes. But then we often add a second arrow of our own making. We add the arrow of judgment, of self-criticism, of believing that we should not feel what we feel. We add the arrow of shame. The first arrow cannot always be avoided. Life brings challenges. Fears arise. Difficult feelings move through us. But the second arrow is optional. We do not have to add the layer of judgment on top of the layer of pain. We do not have to tell ourselves that we should not be afraid, that we are weak for feeling what we feel, that something is wrong with us because fear has arisen. When we were children, others sometimes added this second arrow for us. They denied our fears, ignored them, shamed us for having them. And we learned to do this to ourselves. We learned to be our own harsh critics, our own dismissive parents, always telling ourselves that what we feel is not valid, not important, not welcome. But we can learn something different. We can learn to meet our fears the way a wise and loving adult might meet a child standing at the edge of the darkness. With presence, with understanding, with the simple acknowledgement that what we feel is real, is human, is part of being alive. As we grow, the fears of childhood transform into something more subtle. The dark closet becomes the fear of failure. The loud sound becomes the fear of rejection. The absence of a familiar face becomes the fear of abandonment. The forms change, but the feeling is the same. The quickening of the heart, the tightening of the belly, the sense that something is wrong, that we are not safe, that we must protect ourselves. And underneath these fears, for many of us, there is a deeper fear still. A quiet, persistent belief that we are not quite okay. That there is something fundamentally wrong with us. That if others really knew us, really saw the truth of who we are, they would turn away. This belief takes many shapes. At work, it might appear as the fear of being exposed as incompetent, of being found out as someone who does not really belong. In relationships, it might appear as the fear of being too much or not enough, of being abandoned once our true self is seen. In our bodies, it might appear as the sense that we are not attractive enough, not healthy enough, not acceptable as we are. These fears are so common that they are almost universal. Nearly every person, if they are honest, carries some version of this story. I am not okay. I am not enough. Something is wrong with me. And yet, these stories are not true. They are simply old patterns, old learnings, old responses that we absorbed before we had the wisdom to question them. They are the residue of moments when our fears were met with denial, with ignoring, with shame. They are the shape our being took when it was not fully held. There is a beautiful image that comes from the Buddhist tradition. It speaks of fear as being like a small animal, perhaps a mouse or a rabbit that has learned to hide. When a small animal is frightened, it does not stand out in the open and declare its fear. It finds a hole, a burrow, a dark corner where it can be safe. It makes itself very small and very still, hoping not to be noticed, hoping the danger will pass. This is what our fears do within us. They hide. They burrow into the corners of our being, curling up in the dark places we do not like to look. And from those hidden places, they influence us in ways we may not even recognize. They shape our choices. They color our perceptions. They whisper stories about what is possible and what is not. The way to work with these hidden fears is not to hunt them out or force them into the light. That would only frighten them more. The way to work with them is to become a safe space, to become the kind of presence that allows what is hidden to emerge on its own, in its own time, when it is ready. This is what the wisest adults do for children. They create safety. They offer presence. They let the child know through their steady kindness that whatever arises is welcome here. And slowly, the child's fears can begin to relax, to come out of hiding, to be met with the tenderness they have always needed. We can learn to do this for ourselves, not through effort or force, but through patience, through kindness, through the willingness to be with ourselves the way we might be with a dear friend who is struggling, or a child who is afraid. The Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh spoke often of this kind of self-compassion. He taught that we can learn to hold our fears the way a mother holds a crying baby, not trying to stop the crying, not judging the baby for being upset, but simply offering presence, warmth, care, holding the baby gently and letting it know that it is safe, that it is loved, that everything is okay. "Hello, my fear," he would suggest we say. "I see you. I know you are there. I am here for you." This is not a practice in the sense of something difficult to do. It is more like a recognition, a transformation in how we relate to what arises within us. Instead of pushing fear away or pretending it does not exist, we simply acknowledge it. We make room for it. We let it know that it is welcome to be here, that it does not have to hide anymore. And something remarkable happens when we do this. The fear, which seemed so solid and so powerful, begins to soften. It does not necessarily go away, but it loses some of its grip. It becomes just another wave in the ocean of our experience, arising and passing like all waves do. We carry so much from childhood, not just memories, but ways of being, ways of responding, ways of relating to ourselves and others that were formed in those early years when we were too young to choose. This is not cause for despair. It is simply the truth of how human beings are made. We are shaped by what we experience, and we can be reshaped by what we experience now. Every moment of kindness we offer ourselves is a new experience. Every time we meet our fear with gentleness rather than judgment, we are laying down a new pattern. We are teaching ourselves, slowly, patiently, that it is safe to feel what we feel, that we are okay, just as we are, that the fears we carry do not define us and do not have to rule us. The Buddha taught that nothing is fixed. Everything is in constant change. The patterns we learned in childhood are not permanent. They are simply habits, grooves worn into the mind through repetition. And new grooves can be worn. New habits can be formed. New ways of being can emerge. This is the promise of the path. Not that we will become someone different, but that we will become more fully ourselves, more able to meet whatever arises with presence and kindness, more able to hold our own fears with the tenderness they have always deserved. Let us pause for a moment here. Take a slow, gentle breath. And when you are ready, we will continue our journey together, exploring what it means to fully arrive in our own lives, to let our weight down, to stop holding back from the fullness of being. We have been walking together through tender territory. Now we turn to something simpler, and yet in some ways more profound. We turn to the question of what it means to truly be here. Not partly here, not almost here, not here in body, while the mind is elsewhere, but fully, completely, wholly present in this moment, in this body, in this life. There is an image that captures this beautifully. It is the image of letting your weight down. After all the holding and bracing and preparing, allowing yourself to rest completely in the support that is already there. There is a story about an elderly man who was given a special gift by his family. This man had lived a long life, full of work and responsibility, full of caring for others and meeting the demands of each day. He had raised children and watched them grow. He had weathered difficulties and celebrated joys. He had done what needed to be done, year after year, decade after decade. Now he was old, and his family wanted to give him something memorable, something he had never experienced before. And so they arranged for him to take a ride in a small airplane, the kind with an open cockpit, where you can feel the wind and see the earth spread out below like a great quilt of green and gold. It was his first time in the air. His grandchildren stood on the ground, waving and cheering, as the little plane lifted off and began to climb. They watched it circle overhead, dipping and rising, tracing patterns against the blue sky. And then, after a while, it descended and landed softly on the grass. The old man climbed out of the cockpit, and his family rushed to meet him. They were eager to hear about his adventure, to know what it had been like to fly for the first time. "How was it, grandfather?" they asked. "How was your flight?" The old man paused. He looked at their eager faces, then looked back at the plane, then looked at them again. "It was wonderful," he said slowly. "Truly wonderful. But I must confess something to you. The whole time I was up there, I never quite let my weight down." There is so much in this simple admission. Here was a man who had been given a remarkable experience. He had been lifted into the sky, had seen the world from a perspective few people ever see, had felt the wind and the motion and the freedom of flight. And yet, some part of him had held back. Some part of him had not quite trusted the experience, had not quite surrendered to it, had kept itself braced against the possibility of something going wrong. He had been in the airplane, but he had not been fully in the airplane. He had been having the experience, but he had not been completely present to it. Some essential part of him had remained perched at the edge of the seat, ready to respond to danger, unable to simply rest in what was happening. And is this not true for so many of us, so much of the time? We go through our lives having experiences, but not quite landing in them. We are present, but not fully present. We are here, but some part of us is always somewhere else, watching, evaluating, preparing for what might come next. We sit in a beautiful place, but our minds are busy with tomorrow's concerns. We spend time with people we love, but our attention keeps drifting to things we need to do. We lie down to rest, but the body stays tense, ready to spring into action at a moment's notice. We never quite let our weight down. The Buddha spoke of this in his teachings on mindfulness. He observed that the mind has a tendency to be always somewhere other than where it is. It reaches into the future, anticipating, planning, worrying. It reaches into the past, remembering, regretting, reliving. And in all this reaching, it misses the only place where life actually happens, here, now, in this present moment. The secret of health for both mind and body, the Buddha taught, is not to mourn for the past, worry about the future, or anticipate troubles, but to live in the present moment wisely and earnestly. This sounds simple, and in a way, it is simple. But it is not easy. We have spent so many years practicing the opposite. We have become experts at being elsewhere, at holding ourselves back, at keeping one foot out of our experience just in case we need to make a quick escape. The old man in the airplane had a lifetime of this practice behind him. A lifetime of responsibility, of staying alert, of taking care of things. His body had learned, over many decades, that it was not safe to fully relax. That something might need his attention at any moment. That he could not afford to simply let go and trust that everything would be okay. And so, even in a moment of pure gift, even in an experience that asked nothing of him but to receive it, he could not quite let himself land. He could not quite let his weight down. What does it mean to let your weight down? Think of what happens when you sit in a chair and truly relax. At first, you might perch on the edge, muscles engaged, spine holding itself upright through effort. But then, if you allow it, something shifts. The body begins to release its holding. The muscles soften. The spine settles into the support of the chair. And gradually, the weight that you have been carrying, the weight that you have been holding up through effort, transfers to the surface beneath you. This is letting your weight down. It is trusting that you are supported. It is releasing the effort of holding yourself up and allowing something else to hold you. We do this physically when we truly rest, but we can also do it in a deeper sense. We can let the weight of our lives down. We can stop holding everything up through effort and allow ourselves to be supported by something larger. This is what the spiritual teachers point toward when they speak of surrender, of trust, of letting go. They are not asking us to become passive or careless. They are inviting us to discover that we do not have to carry everything ourselves. That there is a ground beneath us, a support that has always been there, waiting for us to rest upon it. The Zen tradition speaks of this as taking the backward step. Instead of always reaching forward, always striving, always trying to get somewhere else, we turn around. We settle back. We let ourselves arrive in the place where we already are. One teacher described it this way: rest in natural great peace, this exhausted mind, beaten helpless by karma and neurotic thought, like the relentless fury of the pounding waves in the infinite ocean of samsara. Rest in natural great peace. These words are like an invitation to stop struggling, stop striving, stop holding ourselves up. To simply rest, to let the weight down, to discover that peace is not something we have to achieve, but something we can relax into. There is a difference between knowing something and living it. We might understand intellectually that we are supported. We might believe in some abstract way that we do not have to carry everything ourselves. But this understanding often stays in the head. It does not reach the body. It does not change the way we actually move through our days. The old man in the airplane probably knew he was safe. He knew intellectually that the plane was well built, that the pilot was experienced, that everything was fine. But his body did not know it. His body was still bracing, still holding, still preparing for something to go wrong. This is true for many of us. Our minds have one understanding, but our bodies carry a different story. And the body's story is often older, deeper, more influential than anything the mind believes. To truly let our weight down, we must bring our understanding out of the head and into the body. We must let the body know, through direct experience, that it is safe to relax, that it is safe to trust, that it is safe to be fully here. This does not happen through thinking. It does not happen through trying harder or figuring things out. It happens through presence, through the gentle, patient practice of being with what is, without resistance, without holding back, without keeping one foot out the door. When we are willing to be fully present to our experience, something remarkable happens. The experience itself begins to change. Not because we have done anything to it, but because our relationship to it has transformed. The teachers speak of this using the image of waves and water. Imagine you are standing at the edge of the ocean, watching the waves roll in. Each wave seems to have its own identity, its own shape, its own force. One wave is large and powerful. Another is small and gentle. One crashes against the rocks. Another rolls smoothly up the sand. They seem like separate things, distinct events, each one different from the others. But of course, the waves are not separate from the water. They are the water. Each wave is simply the ocean, expressing itself in one particular form for one particular moment. The wave rises, takes shape, and then dissolves back into the depths from which it came. It was never separate from the ocean. It was always water, from beginning to end. Our experiences are like this. Our thoughts, our emotions, our sensations, they arise like waves, take shape for a while, and then pass away. When we are caught up in them, when we are identified with them, they seem solid and important and very real. They seem like they are happening to us, like they define us, like they are the whole of our experience. But when we let our weight down, when we truly settle into presence, something changes. We begin to see that the waves are water. We begin to recognize that our experiences, however intense or vivid they may be, are simply expressions of awareness itself. They arise in awareness, exist in awareness, and dissolve back into awareness. This is a profound realization, but it is not an intellectual one. It is not a concept to be understood. It is an experience to be lived. And it comes not through effort, but through surrender. Not through trying to see the water in the waves, but through letting ourselves be the ocean that holds them all. Let us return for a moment to the old man and his flight. What would it have been like, we might wonder, if he had let his weight down? If he had truly surrendered to the experience, trusting the plane, trusting the pilot, trusting the air itself to hold him? Perhaps he would have felt the wind more fully, the way it moved across his face and through his hair. Perhaps he would have seen the earth more clearly, the patchwork of fields and forests, the silver threads of rivers, the tiny houses and roads that looked like a child's drawing from so high above. Perhaps he would have known, in his body and not just in his mind, the miracle of flight, the freedom of being lifted above the world, held aloft by forces he did not need to understand or control. Perhaps he would have laughed with pure joy. Perhaps he would have wept with gratitude. Perhaps he would have simply been still, present, fully alive to a moment unlike any other in his long life. We cannot know what he missed by holding back. We can only recognize, with compassion, that he was doing what he had learned to do. He was protecting himself. He was staying safe. He was being the person he had always been, the person who carried responsibility, who stayed alert, who took care of things. And we can recognize, too, that we do the same, that we hold back from our own lives in countless small ways, that we perch on the edge of our experiences, never quite letting our weight down, never quite trusting that it is safe to fully be here. The invitation of the spiritual path is to learn something different, not to become careless or irresponsible, not to abandon our duties or neglect the things that need our attention, but to discover that we can be present, fully present, and still take care of what needs to be taken care of, that we can let our weight down and still respond to what life asks of us. In fact, the teachers tell us we respond better when we are fully present. We see more clearly. We act more wisely. We meet each moment with the freshness and attention it deserves, rather than reacting from old habits and automatic patterns. The Buddha taught that mindfulness, full presence in the current moment, is the foundation of the entire path. It is not one practice among many. It is the ground on which everything else rests. Without presence, we are like someone trying to tend a garden in the dark. We might do some good, but we will also miss much of what needs our attention. With presence, everything changes. The garden is illuminated. We can see what is growing and what needs tending. We can respond to what is actually here, rather than to our ideas about what should be here. There is a story from the Zen tradition about a student who came to a master seeking enlightenment. "Please," the student said, "teach me the way to liberation." The master looked at the student kindly. "Have you eaten your breakfast?" he asked. The student was confused by this question, but he answered honestly, "Yes, I have eaten." "Then wash your bowl," the master said. And in that moment, according to the story, the student was awakened. What does this simple exchange teach us? Perhaps many things, but one thing it surely teaches is that enlightenment is not somewhere else. It is not a special state to be achieved through heroic effort. It is here, in the ordinary moments of daily life. Eating breakfast, washing a bowl, letting our weight down into the simple activity of this moment. We are always looking for something more, something special, something that will finally bring us the peace we seek. But peace is not waiting for us at the end of some long journey. Peace is here, in the full presence to whatever is happening now, in the willingness to let our weight down, to stop holding back, to be completely where we are. As we rest here together, consider this possibility. What if you did not have to hold anything up right now? What if you could let go of all the effort, all the vigilance, all the bracing against what might happen? What if, just for these few moments, you could let your weight down completely? You do not have to solve anything. You do not have to figure anything out. You do not have to prepare for tomorrow or review yesterday. You can simply be here, resting, supported by whatever surface holds you. The ground is there. The chair, the bed, the floor, whatever it has been holding you all along. You do not have to help it. You do not have to hold yourself up. You can let go, and you will still be held. This is what the old man could not quite trust, up there in the airplane. But you can trust it now. You can let your body know, through this very moment of rest, that it is safe to soften, safe to release, safe to let the weight down. The Buddha said, "Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without." And peace is available right now, not because your circumstances are perfect, not because you have solved all your problems, but because you are willing to be here, fully, without holding back. The teachers sometimes say that awakening is not about adding something to who you are. It is about removing the barriers to what is already present. We are already whole. We are already at peace. We are already held by something vast and loving and utterly reliable. But we have forgotten this. We have covered it over with layers of worry and effort and self-protection. We have been holding ourselves up so long that we have forgotten what it feels like to rest. Letting our weight down is not an achievement. It is a release. It is the falling away of everything that is not essential. And what remains, when all the holding falls away, is simply this moment, this breath, this awareness, this peace. Let's pause for a moment. Let these words settle into you like stones sinking gently through clear water. And when you are ready, we will continue our journey together, exploring how we can change our sense of who we are, from the small self that worries and strives, to the vast awareness that holds it all. We have explored what it means to let our weight down, to stop holding ourselves apart from our experience, to trust that we are supported and allow ourselves to be fully here. We have seen how much of life we miss when we perch at the edge of our moments, never quite landing, never quite arriving. Now we turn to something that may at first seem abstract, but is in truth the most intimate discovery of all. We turn to the question of who we are. Not who we think we are, not who we have been told we are, not the collection of stories and memories and habits we have gathered over the years, but who we truly are, beneath all of that, the vast awareness in which everything arises, the sky that holds all clouds, the ocean that holds all waves. This is not a philosophical question, it is a lived discovery. And it begins, as so many discoveries do, with a shift in how we see. There is a story about a teacher who was known for unconventional methods. One day, this teacher gathered a group of students in a large room. The students sat in rows, waiting expectantly, wondering what lesson would be offered. The teacher was known for surprising them, for teaching in ways that bypassed the thinking mind and went straight to something deeper. On this day, the teacher brought out a large sheet of paper, the kind that covers most of a wall when unrolled. With great care, the teacher fastened it to the wall so that everyone could see. The paper was white and empty, a vast blank space. Then the teacher picked up a pen and, in the center of all that whiteness, drew a small mark. It was simple, just a few lines forming a shape that might have been a letter, or a bird in flight, or simply an abstract form. The mark was small, barely visible against the expanse of white surrounding it. The teacher turned to face the students. "What do you see?" the teacher asked. The students looked at the paper. One by one, they offered their answers. "A bird," said one. "A letter," said another. "A mark," said a third. "A shape. A symbol." The teacher listened to each answer with patience. Then, when everyone had spoken, the teacher smiled gently. "You have all told me about the mark," the teacher said. "But none of you has mentioned the paper. What you are looking at is not a mark. What you are looking at is a vast white space, with a small mark passing through it." The room fell silent. something shifted in the air. The students looked again at the paper, and this time they saw it differently. They saw the whiteness, the openness, the vast empty space that had been there all along, holding the small mark the way the sky holds a bird in flight. This is how we look at our lives, the teacher continued. We focus on the marks, the events, the thoughts, the emotions. We identify with them. We think they are who we are. But we forget the paper. We forget the vast open space in which all of this appears and disappears. We forget that we are the sky, not the bird. This simple teaching points to something profound about the nature of identity. Most of the time, we experience ourselves as the content of our awareness. We identify with our thoughts, our feelings, our sensations, our stories. When a thought arises, we become the thinker. When an emotion arises, we become the one who feels. When a memory surfaces, we become the person who lived that experience. This is natural. This is how human beings are wired. We are meaning-making creatures, constantly weaving our experiences into a narrative, constructing a sense of self from the threads of what happens to us. But this constructed self, this story we tell about who we are, is not the whole picture. It is like the small mark on the vast sheet of paper. It is real in its way. It has its place. But it is not all that we are. Beneath the content of our experience, there is something else. There is the awareness in which all content appears. There is the knowing itself, the simple fact of being conscious, the open space in which thoughts and feelings and sensations arise and pass away. This awareness is not another thing to be seen. It is the seeing itself. It is not another thought to be noticed. It is the noticing itself. It is not something we have. It is what we are. The Buddha pointed to this when he taught about the nature of mind. He said that mind is like space, open and boundless, able to contain anything without being stained or diminished by it. Clouds pass through the sky, but the sky remains unchanged. Thoughts pass through awareness, but awareness remains clear, open, untouched. In the sky, there is no distinction of east and west, the Buddha taught. People create distinctions out of their own minds and then believe them to be true. The distinctions we create, the identities we construct, the stories we tell about ourselves, these are like lines drawn on water. They appear for a moment, they seem real, and then they dissolve. But the water remains. The awareness remains. The vast open space of our true nature remains, unchanged by anything that passes through it. When we begin to recognize this, something remarkable happens. The things that seem so solid, so important, so defining, begin to loosen their grip. The thoughts that felt like the whole of our reality reveal themselves to be just thoughts, passing through. The emotions that seem to swallow us whole reveal themselves to be just emotions, waves in the ocean of awareness. The story of who we are, with all its dramas and tragedies and triumphs, reveals itself to be just a story, one possible narrative among many. This is not a rejection of our experience. It is not a dismissal of what we feel or think or remember. It is simply a widening of perspective. We see that there is more to us than what passes through. We see that we are the space in which everything appears, not just the appearances themselves. The Zen masters called this recognition seeing your true nature, or knowing your original face. They said it was like waking up from a dream. In the dream, everything seems so real, so urgent, so important. But when we wake, we see that it was all a play of mind, images arising and dissolving in the space of awareness. This does not mean that life is meaningless or that nothing matters. Quite the opposite. When we recognize our true nature, life becomes more vivid, more precious, more alive. Because we are no longer clinging to our experiences, trying to hold on to the pleasant ones and push away the unpleasant ones, we can meet each moment freshly, openly, with the wonder of a child seeing the world for the first time. There is a saying that sometimes appears in spiritual teachings. Angels can fly because they take themselves lightly. This is a playful way of pointing to what happens when we stop taking our thoughts and stories so seriously. When we stop believing that we are the small mark on the paper and remember that we are the vast white space, something lightens. The heaviness we have been carrying, the weight of all our worries and identities and self-definitions, begins to lift. This does not mean we become irresponsible or careless. It does not mean we stop caring about things or stop showing up for our lives. It means we hold everything a little more lightly. We dance with our experience instead of being crushed by it. We play with life instead of fighting against it. The great Zen teacher Shunryu Suzuki captured this beautifully when he said, "In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind, there are few." When we think we know who we are, when we have become experts on ourselves, we limit our possibilities. We see only what fits the story we have constructed. We miss the vastness that we actually are. But when we approach ourselves with beginner's mind, with fresh eyes, with the openness of someone who does not already know the answer, everything becomes possible. We are not trapped by our past. We are not defined by our stories. We are free to be whatever this moment calls for, whatever wants to emerge from the vast open space of our being. One of the most healing discoveries on this path is realizing that our suffering is not as personal as we thought. When we are caught in our stories, our pain feels uniquely ours. Our fears, our wounds, our struggles, they seem to belong to us alone. We carry them like heavy stones, believing that no one else could understand, that no one else has ever felt quite what we feel. But when we begin to share our stories with others, something surprising happens. We discover that our pain is not unique. We discover that others have walked similar paths, have carried similar burdens, have wept similar tears. The specific details may differ, but the underlying experience is shared. Loneliness, fear, grief, confusion, the longing to be loved, the fear of being rejected, these are not personal problems. They are part of being human. In many traditions, there are circles where people gather to share their experiences. They sit together, often in a simple space, and one by one they speak their truth. They tell their stories, not to receive advice or to be fixed, but simply to be heard. And in the hearing, something transforms. The story that seemed so heavy when carried alone becomes lighter when witnessed by others. The pain that seemed so isolating becomes a bridge of connection. We see ourselves in each other's faces. We recognize our own struggles in each other's words. And slowly, the illusion of separation begins to dissolve. This is why the Buddha emphasized community, what he called Sangha, as one of the 3 treasures of the path. We need each other, not because we are weak, but because we are human. We heal in relationship. We wake up in connection. We remember who we truly are by seeing ourselves reflected in the eyes of others. There is another aspect to this recognition of our true nature, and it has to do with the heart. When we see that we are the vast open space of awareness, we might think this would make us detached, distant, uninvolved with the play of life. But the opposite is true. When we recognize our boundless nature, the heart naturally opens. Compassion arises not as an effort but as a response. We feel connected to all beings because we see that, in truth, we are not separate from them. An ancient Zen master taught about this unity of awareness and love. He said, "Good friends, my teaching takes awareness and kindness as its foundation. Never say mistakenly that awareness and kindness are different. They are one, not two. Awareness itself is the substance of kindness. Kindness itself is the function of awareness." This is a beautiful teaching. It tells us that when we truly wake up, when we recognize the vast open space of our being, we do not become cold or indifferent. We become more loving, not less. Because awareness and kindness are not separate. They are two aspects of the same reality. The clear seeing and the warm heart arise together, like the light and warmth of the sun. When we see clearly, we naturally respond with compassion. When we stop being caught in our own stories, we have space to feel the joys and sorrows of others. When we recognize that we are all waves in the same ocean, we cannot help but care about the well-being of every wave. There is a practice, if we can call it that, which is really more of a recognition, a remembering. It involves noticing what is always already here. Right now, as you rest and listen to these words, there is awareness. There is the simple fact of being conscious, of knowing that experience is happening. This awareness is not something you have to create or achieve. It is already present. It is what allows you to hear these words, to feel your body, to notice whatever is arising in this moment. This awareness has always been here. It was here when you were a child, looking at the world with wonder. It was here during your happiest moments and your most difficult ones, and it will be here tonight when you fall asleep. It does not come and go. It is the constant background, the unchanging presence in which all the changing experiences of your life appear. You do not have to do anything to find this awareness. You only have to notice that it is already here. You only have to turn your attention gently back to the one who is aware. Not to any particular experience, but to the experiencing itself. Not to the content of consciousness, but to consciousness itself. This is what the teacher meant when pointing to the paper instead of the mark. The mark comes and goes, but the paper is always there. The thoughts and feelings come and go, but the awareness that knows them is always here. You are that awareness. You have always been that awareness. You will always be that awareness. Everything else is just weather passing through the sky. When we rest in this recognition, the whole quality of experience changes. We still have thoughts, but we are not lost in them. We still have emotions, but we are not overwhelmed by them. We still have a story about who we are, but we hold it lightly, knowing it is just one way of describing something that cannot really be captured in words. There is a peace that comes from this recognition. Not the peace of having everything figured out, but the peace of no longer needing to figure everything out. Not the peace of having solved all our problems, but the peace of knowing that we are bigger than any problem. Not the peace of never feeling pain again, but the peace of knowing that even pain arises in a space that is untouched by pain. The Buddha called this the peace that passes understanding. It is not a peace that comes from the mind. It is a peace that comes from recognizing what is beyond the mind. It is the peace of coming home to what we have always been. And this peace is available right now. Not tomorrow, not after years of practice, not when you have finally fixed yourself or solved your problems. Now, in this breath, in this moment of simply being aware. The teacher with the paper was pointing to something that can only be discovered, never merely taught. Words can indicate the direction. Stories can inspire the journey. But the actual recognition, the moment when you see that you are the space and not just the content, this can only happen in your own direct experience. And it is happening, perhaps, even now. As you rest here, listening to these words, there is a quiet knowing. There is a stillness beneath the movement of thought. There is a vastness that contains everything you are experiencing, yet is not limited to any of it. You do not have to do anything special to be this awareness. You already are this awareness. You are simply being invited to notice what has always been true. The mark on the paper is beautiful. Your life, with all its joys and sorrows, its accomplishments and failures, its hopes and fears, this is a beautiful mark. It deserves to be honored and appreciated. It is the unique expression of something infinite taking form in this particular way, in this particular time and place. But you are not only the mark. You are also the paper. You are also the vast white space that holds everything. And in remembering this, in resting in this recognition, you find a freedom that nothing can take away. You are the sky, and thoughts are clouds passing through. You are the ocean, and experiences are waves rising and falling on the surface. You are the paper, vast and white and open, and life is drawing beautiful marks upon you. None of these marks diminish you. None of these clouds stain the sky. None of these waves disturb the depths of the ocean. You remain what you have always been, pure awareness, boundless and free, the space in which all things appear. The Zen teacher Huang Po said, "The great void is bright and full of splendor." This void, this openness, this awareness that you are, is not empty in the way we usually think of emptiness. It is radiant. It is alive. It is full of intelligence and compassion. Let yourself rest in this now. There is nothing to achieve, nothing to understand. Simply be what you are, vast and open and at peace. And when you are ready, we will continue our journey together, exploring how the heart can hold even the most tender places with compassion, and how forgiveness opens the door to freedom. We have traveled far together on this journey. We have explored the nature of thought and the gifts we miss when we are lost in the mind. We have traced the roots of fear back to childhood and discovered how we might hold ourselves with greater kindness. We have learned what it means to let our weight down, to truly arrive in our experience. And we have glimpsed our vast nature, the sky in which all clouds pass, the ocean in which all waves arise. Now, we turn to the heart. Not the heart as an organ, pumping blood through the body, though that too is miraculous, but the heart as a capacity, The heart as the place where we meet life with tenderness. The heart as the space that can hold even what seems too large, too painful, too overwhelming to bear. This is perhaps the most important discovery of all. For it is the heart that transforms understanding into wisdom. It is the heart that turns insight into freedom. It is the heart that allows us to be fully human, fully alive, fully present to both the beauty and the sorrow of this precious existence. There is a question that arises naturally as we walk this path. What do we do when the pain is too much? What do we do when grief or fear or regret swells so large that our heart seems too small to contain it? What do we do when we have touched the vastness of awareness, yet still find ourselves overwhelmed by the intensity of what we feel? This is an honest question, and it deserves an honest answer. The truth is that sometimes our own heart does feel too small. Sometimes the waves are so large that even knowing we are the ocean does not seem to help. Sometimes we need something more than our own resources. Sometimes we need to rest in a heart larger than our own. The Buddhist tradition speaks of this with great tenderness. It offers the image of resting in the heart of compassion itself. Not our personal compassion, which may be exhausted or overwhelmed, but the boundless compassion that holds all beings, that has always held all beings, that will never cease holding all beings. This is not about believing in something outside ourselves. It is about recognizing that compassion is woven into the fabric of reality. It is about trusting that we are held, even when we cannot feel it. It is about letting ourselves be loved, even when we have forgotten how. There is a story about a wise teacher who wanted to show two students something important about the nature of awareness and connection. The teacher called the two students to come and gave each of them a chicken. The chickens were alive and healthy, clucking softly, their feathers warm in the students' hands. "I want you to do something for me," the teacher said. "Take your chicken and find a place where no one can see you. When you are certain that no one is watching, release the chicken and return to me." The first student nodded and walked away. He went behind a nearby building, looked around to make sure no one was there, released his chicken, and returned to the teacher within a few minutes. "Done," he said. "No one saw me." The teacher nodded and waited for the second student to return. Hours passed. The sun moved across the sky. Evening came, and still the second student had not returned. Finally, as the stars were beginning to appear, the second student walked slowly back to the teacher. He was still carrying his chicken. "I could not do it," he said quietly. "I walked and walked, looking for a place where no one could see. But everywhere I went, the chicken could see. I could not find a place where I was truly alone." The teacher smiled gently and placed a hand on the student's shoulder. "You have understood," the teacher said. This simple story points to something profound about the nature of connection. We often feel alone in our struggles. We carry our pain privately, believing that no one sees, no one knows, no one could understand. We hide our fears and regrets in the dark corners of our being, hoping they will stay hidden, hoping we will never have to face them. But the truth is that we are never truly alone. We are always seen, always witnessed, always held in a web of connection that extends far beyond what our ordinary eyes can perceive. The chicken sees. The trees see. The sky sees. the vast awareness that is the ground of all being sees. We cannot find a place where we are truly unseen, because seeing is the nature of existence itself. This might sound frightening if we are attached to our hiding, but it is actually deeply comforting. It means that we do not have to carry our burdens alone. It means that the compassion of the universe is always present, always available, always holding us, even when we have forgotten it is there. The Buddha spoke of this when he taught about the interconnection of all things. He said that nothing exists in isolation, that everything arises in dependence on everything else, that we are all threads in a single vast tapestry. As a net is made up of a series of ties, he taught, so everything in this world is connected by a series of ties. If anyone thinks that the mesh of a net is an independent, isolated thing, they are mistaken. We are not isolated. We are not separate. We are part of something much larger than ourselves. And that something holds us with infinite tenderness, whether we know it or not. There is another story, more tender still, about the power of attention and the healing that becomes possible when we truly see one another. It concerns someone who carried a great weight for many years. This person had been involved in a conflict long ago, a situation where choices were made in a moment of intensity, choices that could not be taken back. The details of what happened do not matter for our purposes. What matters is that this person carried the weight of that moment for decades. It lived in them like a stone, heavy and cold, never warming, never dissolving. They tried to forget. They tried to move on. They built a life, raised a family, did good work in the world. But the weight remained. It was there when they woke in the morning and when they lay down at night. It colored everything, a shadow that would not lift. What they carried most heavily was not just the memory of what had happened, but the face of another person involved. A face that had looked at them in that intense moment. A face that had shown something, perhaps fear, perhaps understanding, perhaps a wordless communication that passed between two beings in a single heartbeat. This person kept a photograph. They had carried it for years, looking at it sometimes, wondering, grieving, unable to let go and unable to find peace. And then one day, after many years, they wrote a letter. The letter was addressed to the one whose face they had carried. It was a letter of acknowledgement, of sorrow, of asking for something that might not be possible to give. It was a letter that said, simply and honestly, what had lived unspoken for so long. "I have carried you with me all these years," the letter said. "I have wondered about your life, your family, your hopes and dreams. I have wished things could have been different. I have longed for understanding, for peace, for some way to set down this weight I have been holding. I do not know if forgiveness is possible. I only know that I am sorry. I only know that I see you, have always seen you, will always see you. And I hope, wherever you are, that you are at peace." Writing this letter was an act of profound courage. It was also an act of profound release. In the very act of acknowledging what had been hidden, in the very act of offering their truth to another, something shifted. The stone that had lived in this person's chest for so long began, finally, to soften. This is what happens when we bring attention to what we have been avoiding. The things we hide from ourselves, the regrets we carry, the shame we bury. These do not go away when we refuse to look at them. They simply go underground, continuing to influence us from the shadows, shaping our lives in ways we may not even recognize. But when we turn toward them, when we bring the light of awareness and the warmth of compassion to even the most tender places, something begins to heal. Not because we have fixed anything or changed what happened, but because we have finally allowed ourselves to be with what is. This is the heart's great gift. It can hold what the mind cannot solve. It can embrace what the intellect cannot understand. It can offer presence to the places that have been waiting, sometimes for many years, to be seen. The Buddha taught that attention is the most basic form of love. When we truly pay attention to something, we are offering it our presence, our care, our willingness to be with it, just as it is. This is what the heart does. It attends. It witnesses. It holds. And in that holding, healing becomes possible. There is a teaching about what to do when our own heart feels too small for what we are carrying. The teaching suggests that we can rest in a larger heart. We can allow ourselves to be held by compassion itself, by the love that moves through all things, by the tenderness that is the ground of existence. One way to do this is through imagination, though it is more than imagination. We can picture ourselves held in the embrace of something vast and loving. It might appear as a figure of compassion, a bodhisattva or a saint, or simply a presence of pure love. It might appear as light, warm and golden, surrounding and permeating our being. It might appear as simply a feeling, a sense of being held, supported, loved without condition. When we allow ourselves to rest in this larger embrace, something remarkable happens. Our own capacity for compassion begins to reawaken. It is as if the love we receive from outside reconnects us with the love that lives within. The heart that felt too small begins to expand. The walls we had built around our pain begin to soften. This is not weakness. This is wisdom. It is the wisdom of knowing that we do not have to do everything alone. It is the wisdom of receiving as well as giving. It is the wisdom of letting ourselves be loved so that we can love more fully. The great teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, spoke of this when he taught about compassion for ourselves. He suggested that we can hold our own suffering the way a mother holds a crying child. Not trying to stop the crying, not judging the child for being upset, but simply offering presence, warmth, care. Darling, I am here for you, we can say to our own pain. I see you. I'm not going to leave you. You are safe. This is not a technique. It is a way of being. It is the natural response of a heart that has remembered its true nature. The poet Rumi wrote often about the heart and its capacity to hold all things. In one of his most beautiful verses, he offered guidance for those moments when we feel lost, when we feel far from peace, when we feel unable to find our way. Look as long as you can at the friend you love, he wrote. No matter whether that friend is moving away from you or coming back toward you, the friend he speaks of is not just a human friend, though it includes that. The friend is love itself. The friend is awareness itself. The friend is the vast, compassionate presence that holds all beings, that has never left us, that is always available if we will only turn toward it. Sometimes this friend seems to be moving away. Sometimes we feel abandoned by life, by love, by everything we thought we could count on. In those moments, Rumi says, keep looking. Do not turn away. Do not give up. Keep your attention on what matters most. And sometimes the friend seems to be coming back toward us. Sometimes grace floods in unexpectedly, filling us with a peace we did not earn and cannot explain. In those moments too, Rumi says, keep looking. Receive what is being offered. Let yourself be found. This is the practice of the heart, if we can call it a practice. It is simply the willingness to stay present to love, whether love seems close or far. It is the willingness to keep facing life with tenderness, even when life feels harsh. It is the willingness to trust that we are held, even when we cannot feel the arms around us. As we near the end of this journey together, let us gather the threads of what we have explored. We began with the story of 3 fish, and the discovery that the small, familiar lake is not the whole of reality, that there is an ocean vast beyond imagining waiting for us to find our way home. We explored the sticky nature of thought and saw how the mind spins its webs of worry and planning, trying to find safety in a world that feels uncertain. We discovered how much we miss when we are lost in thought, how many gifts life offers that we cannot receive when our hands are full of worry. We traced the roots of fear back to childhood and found compassion for the small one within us, who learned, so long ago, how to respond to the unknown. We learned what it means to let our weight down, to stop holding ourselves apart from experience, to trust that we are supported and finally, fully, arrive. We glimpsed our true nature as the vast open space of awareness, the sky in which all clouds pass, the paper on which all marks are made. All of these discoveries are really one discovery. They are all pointing to the same truth, seen from different angles. The truth is that we are not what we thought we were. We are not the small, separate, frightened self that we have taken ourselves to be. We are something vast and free and infinitely precious. We are awareness itself, expressing itself in this particular form, in this particular moment, for reasons we may never fully understand. And we are held, always held by the ground beneath us, by the air that breathes us, by the web of connection that links us to all beings, by the love that is the fabric of existence itself. We do not have to earn this holding. We do not have to be worthy of it. It is simply what is. It is the nature of reality, and our only task, if we have a task at all, is to let ourselves receive it. The Buddha said near the end of his life, "Be a lamp unto yourself. Be a refuge unto yourself." This might seem to contradict what we have been saying about letting ourselves be held by something larger, but it does not. Because the self that is our lamp, the self that is our refuge, is not the small frightened self. It is the vast aware self. It is the self that is not separate from the love that holds all things. It is the self that is already home. When we rest in this self, we discover that we have always had what we were looking for. We have always been what we were seeking to become. The peace we longed for was never outside us. It was here all along, waiting for us to stop searching and simply be. As we prepare to bring this exploration to a close, let the teachings settle in you like snow falling on a quiet landscape. You do not have to hold on to anything you have heard. You do not have to remember or apply or make any effort at all. Simply let what resonates find its home within you. Let what does not resonate drift away like leaves on a stream. The heart knows what it needs. Trust it. The awareness that you are knows how to integrate wisdom. Trust it. The love that holds all things knows how to heal what needs healing. Trust it. You have been on a beautiful journey. Not just tonight, listening to these words, but all your life. Every experience you have ever had, every joy and every sorrow, every moment of clarity and every moment of confusion, all of it has been part of your path. All of it has been bringing you home. And you are home now. Not because you have arrived somewhere new, but because you have remembered where you have always been. In the heart of awareness, in the embrace of compassion, in the vast open space that is your true nature. The great Tibetan teacher offered these words, and we offer them now to you. Rest in natural great peace, this exhausted mind, beaten helpless by karma and thought, like the relentless fury of the pounding waves in the infinite ocean of samsara. Rest in natural great peace. You can rest now. You can let the waves of thought settle into the depths from which they arose. You can let yourself be held by the peace that has always been here, waiting for you to notice. We have journeyed through profound territory together. We have touched the vast nature of awareness. We have discovered the heart's capacity to hold all things. We have glimpsed what the teachers call awakening, that shift in identity from the small separate self to the boundless space in which all experience arises. And now, a question naturally emerges. What happens next? How do we carry this understanding back into ordinary life? How do we bring the peace we have touched into the kitchen, the workplace, the grocery store, the countless small moments that make up our days? This is perhaps the most important question of all. For awakening that remains only in special moments, only during meditation or retreat, is not yet complete. True freedom must be lived. It must breathe through us as we move through the world. It must inform the way we wash the dishes, greet our neighbors, and rest our heads on the pillow at night. There is a story about a student who went to visit a renowned teacher. The student had been practicing for many years. He had read the scriptures, sat in meditation, attended teachings and retreats. He had glimpsed moments of great clarity and peace. But something was still missing. He felt that true awakening remained just out of reach, waiting for him in some future moment, some deeper practice, some final breakthrough. And so he traveled a great distance to meet this teacher, hoping to receive the transmission that would complete his understanding. When he arrived, he found the teacher in a small dwelling, doing the most ordinary things. Sweeping the floor, preparing a simple meal, folding cloth. The teacher greeted him warmly and invited him to sit. "I have come to learn the secret of enlightenment," the student said earnestly. "I have practiced for so long, and yet I feel I have not arrived. Please, teach me." The teacher smiled and continued stirring a pot of soup. "Have you eaten?" the teacher asked. "Yes," said the student, a little confused by the question. "I ate before I came." "Then you must be tired from your journey. Rest now. We will talk later." The student rested, and when he woke, the teacher was outside, tending to a small garden. The student watched as the teacher pulled weeds, watered plants, and paused occasionally to look at the sky or listen to birdsong. "When will we begin the teaching?" the student asked. The teacher looked up, hands still in the soil. "We have already begun," the teacher said. "We have never stopped." This story points to something essential about the nature of spiritual realization. We often imagine that awakening will be a dramatic event, a flash of lightning, a moment of cosmic revelation, a permanent shift that transforms everything and leaves us forever changed. And sometimes, for some people, there are such moments. But more often, awakening is quiet. It is subtle. It seeps into us gradually, like water soaking into earth. And most importantly, it does not take us away from ordinary life. It brings us more fully into it. The teacher stirring soup was not distracted from enlightenment. The teacher was expressing enlightenment. The simple act of stirring, done with full presence and care, was itself the teaching. The weeding of the garden, the listening to birdsong, the warmth of welcoming a guest, all of this was the Dharma in action. The Zen tradition has a beautiful phrase for this: chop wood, carry water. It points to the fact that before enlightenment, we chop wood and carry water. After enlightenment, we chop wood and carry water. The activities do not change, but something in how we meet them transforms completely. What is it that transforms? It is not that we suddenly become perfect or that life becomes free of challenges. It is not that we float through our days in a state of perpetual bliss, untouched by difficulty or sorrow. What transforms is our relationship to experience. What changes is the way we hold what arises. Before, we were caught in our experiences. We were tossed about by thoughts and emotions, identified with every passing state, convinced that our happiness depended on circumstances being a certain way. After, we are the space in which experiences arise. We are the sky through which clouds pass. We are the ocean that holds all waves. The experiences still come, but we are no longer lost in them. We can feel joy without clinging to it. We can feel sorrow without being drowned by it. We can meet each moment freshly, without the heavy overlay of past conditioning and future worry. This is what the Buddha meant when he spoke of liberation. Not an escape from life, but a freedom within life. Not a rejection of experience, but a full embrace of it, held in the spacious awareness of our true nature. There is something profoundly sacred about ordinary moments. We tend to overlook them. We rush through our days, treating the mundane as something to get through so we can arrive at the important parts. We wash dishes while thinking about something else. We walk down the street without seeing the sky. We eat meals without tasting them, talk with friends without truly listening, move through our homes without noticing the light falling through windows. But every moment is the only moment. Every breath is the only breath. Every simple act, done with presence, is a doorway to the infinite. The great teacher Thich Nhat Hanh devoted much of his teaching to this understanding. He spoke of washing dishes as a form of meditation. He taught that when we wash a dish, we should just wash the dish, giving it our complete attention, feeling the warmth of the water, the smooth surface of the plate, the simple satisfaction of making something clean. While washing the dishes, he wrote, one should only be washing the dishes, which means that, while washing the dishes, one should be completely aware of the fact that one is washing the dishes. This might seem obvious. Of course, we know we are washing dishes when we wash dishes. But do we really? Or is the mind elsewhere, planning tomorrow, replaying yesterday, wishing we were doing something more interesting? When we truly wash dishes, when we are completely present to the act, something opens. The boundary between ourselves and the activity dissolves. There is no longer a separate self doing a task. There is only the flowing of water, the movement of hands, the simple arising of this moment in its fullness. This is meditation. This is presence. This is, in its own quiet way, enlightenment. The same is true for every activity. Walking can be a meditation. Eating can be a meditation. Listening to a friend can be a meditation. Even waiting in line, even sitting in traffic, even doing tasks we would rather not do, all of these can become doorways to presence if we meet them with awareness. There is a teaching that says we should treat every action as if it were our last. Not in a morbid way, but in the sense of giving it our full attention, our complete care. If this were the last dish you would ever wash, would you rush through it? If this were the last meal you would ever eat, would you swallow it without tasting? Life is always ending and always beginning. Each moment dies into the next. Each breath completes itself and makes way for the one that follows. When we remember this, when we let the preciousness of each moment touch us, everything becomes vivid. Everything becomes worthy of our attention. Everything becomes sacred. The poet and teacher Mary Oliver captured this when she asked, "What is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" The question is not about grand plans or great achievements. It is about this moment, this breath, this ordinary, extraordinary instant of being alive. There is a particular kind of freedom that comes from accepting the ordinary. So much of our suffering comes from wanting things to be different than they are. We want more excitement, more recognition, more proof that our lives are meaningful. We look at the simple reality of our days and find it lacking. We imagine that happiness is somewhere else, waiting for us in some future moment when circumstances finally arrange themselves properly. But happiness is not somewhere else. Peace is not waiting in the future. They are here, now, woven into the fabric of this very moment, available to anyone who stops long enough to notice. The Buddha taught about contentment as a great treasure. He said that those who are content have found true wealth, regardless of their external circumstances. Not because they have given up on life or stopped caring about things, but because they have learned to find fullness in what is present, rather than always reaching for what is absent. This is not passivity. It is not resignation. It is wisdom. It is the recognition that this moment, just as it is, contains everything we need. Not everything we want, perhaps, but everything we need to wake up, to be present, to be at peace. Let us explore a story about finding the sacred in the ordinary. There was once a person who lived a very simple life. They had no great accomplishments to speak of, no fame, no wealth. They lived in a small dwelling and spent their days in simple activities, cooking meals, tending a garden, walking in the nearby hills, sitting quietly in the evening as the light faded. Their neighbors sometimes wondered about this person. They seemed content, even happy, but their life appeared so unremarkable. What could they possibly find satisfying in such a quiet existence? One day, a visitor came to the village, someone searching for wisdom. They had heard that a wise person lived in this place, and they wanted to find them. "Where can I find the sage?" the visitor asked a villager. The villager shrugged. "There is no sage here. Just ordinary people living ordinary lives." But the visitor persisted, asking everyone they met. Finally, someone pointed to the small dwelling on the edge of the village. "There is a person who lives there," they said. "I do not know if they are wise, but there is something peaceful about them. Perhaps you could speak with them." The visitor went to the dwelling and found the person outside, hanging cloth to dry in the sun. They were doing this simple task with such care, such attention, that the visitor stopped and watched for a moment before speaking. "I am looking for wisdom," the visitor said finally. "Can you help me?" The person smiled and continued hanging the cloth. "Wisdom is not something I have that I could give to you," they said. "But I can tell you what I have learned in my simple life." "Please," said the visitor. The person finished with the cloth and turned to face their guest. "When I eat, I eat. When I walk, I walk. When I rest, I rest. I do not divide my life into important and unimportant. I do not wait for special moments to be present. Every moment is special. Every moment is the only moment there is." The visitor frowned slightly. "But is that all? Surely there must be more to wisdom than just paying attention to ordinary things." The person laughed gently. "You say just paying attention as if it were a small thing. But tell me, how many moments of your life have you truly paid attention to? How many breaths have you fully received? How many steps have you taken with complete awareness? If you could pay attention to one single moment, fully and completely, you would find the entire universe contained within it. You would need nothing else." This teaching is so simple that we often miss it. We want complexity. We want special techniques and secret teachings and advanced practices. We want enlightenment to be difficult, so that we can feel accomplished when we achieve it. But the teachers keep pointing us back to the obvious. They keep saying that what we seek is already here, that the extraordinary is hidden within the ordinary, that every moment of genuine presence is a moment of awakening. The Zen master Dogen wrote, "Enlightenment is intimacy with all things." Intimacy. Not distance, not transcendence, not escape. Intimacy. Being close to life. Being present to what is actually happening. Feeling the texture of this moment, whatever it contains. When we are intimate with the dishes we wash, we are enlightened. When we are intimate with the breath we breathe, we are enlightened. When we are intimate with the sorrow we feel or the joy that arises, or the simple fact of being alive in a body on this earth, we are enlightened. This does not mean we are always in a state of blissful awareness. It does not mean we never get distracted or caught in thought or swept away by emotion. It means that we know the way home. We know that presence is always available, always just one breath away. And we trust that even when we forget, we can remember. Even when we wander, we can return. As we rest here together, consider how this understanding might live in your own life. Not as another thing to do or achieve, but as a gentle invitation. An invitation to meet the ordinary moments with a little more presence. To let the simple activities of your day become doorways to peace. to discover the sacred hiding in plain sight, in the cup of tea, in the morning light, in the sound of rain, in the face of someone you love. You do not have to change anything about your life. You do not have to add special practices or carve out hours for meditation. You simply have to be where you are, doing what you are doing, with a little more awareness, a little more attention, a little more willingness to receive the gift of this moment. The Buddha was once asked to summarize his entire teaching in a single word. He said, "Awareness. That is all. That is everything. Awareness. Presence. Being here, now, for this one precious moment that will never come again." There is a kind of grace that comes from living this way. When we stop dividing life into ordinary and special, when we stop waiting for something better to happen, a great relaxation becomes possible. We can let go of the endless striving, the constant reaching for more, the exhausting effort to make life into something other than what it is. We can simply be here, now, alive. And in that simple being, we find what we were looking for all along. Not fireworks and revelations, but something quieter and more lasting. A peace that does not depend on circumstances. A contentment that does not require anything to change. A love that embraces everything just as it is. This is the fruit of the path. Not a destination we arrive at, but a way of walking. Not a state we achieve, but a quality of presence we cultivate, moment by moment, breath by breath, through all the ordinary days of our one wild and precious life. The teachers sometimes say that before awakening, mountains are mountains and rivers are rivers. During the process of awakening, mountains are no longer mountains and rivers